and good afternoon, everyone. This is Teresa Foley, host of Dark Thoughts of Hope. Yeah, I don't know why I did an accent. I just thought it would be funny. And it's actually evening, so I promised I would be back to read Chapter 5 of I Know What You Did Last Summer. So, without further goofing around, here we go. When the envelope arrived in the morning mail, Ray Bronson was not surprised. He opened it and drew out the newspaper clipping. He knew what it contained, for he had read it many times before. Now he did so again and felt all the old sensations. A 10-year-old boy was killed last night in a hit-and-run accident on Mountain Road, 2 miles south of the Silver Springs picnic area. Dead is David Gregg, son of Mr. and Mrs. Michael Gregg, of 1279 Morningside Road, Northeast. David was riding his bicycle when he was struck by the unidentified automobile. A phone call from one of the occupants of the car informed authorities of the accident. A police car and an ambulance immediately departed for the scene. The boy was conscious upon arrival of the rescue crew, but died en route to St. Joseph's Hospital. Mr. Gregg informed reporters that his son had been spending the night at the home of a friend in the Mountain Road area and had evidently decided to return home during the evening. The bicycle did not have a light or reflectors. Police are looking for the car that struck young Gregg. Paint deposits on the bicycle show it to have been light blue in color. David is survived by his parents, a half-brother, a half-sister, a maternal grandfather, 2 aunts, an uncle. Ray unfolded the article and put it back into the envelope. His own address stared up at him in the same black hand-printed letters that had formed the message to Julie. It's not a joke, he told himself quietly. It's not a joke at all. Not that he had ever really believed that it was. Since Julie had thought so, there had seemed little sense in pursuing the matter. It was possible. It might have been a joke, and she had managed to convince herself. In his heart, even then, he had been pretty sure that it wasn't. So it's caught up with us, he thought finally. His own lack of surprise was the thing that surprised him. It was as though he had known all along, somewhere deep within himself, that this was going to happen. It was why he had come home, and a year ago it was why he had gone away. Raymond Bronson of a year ago had been a pretty spineless individual. He had always been small, which was part of it. It wasn't so much that he was short, 5'8" was a passable height, as the fact that he was lean and light-boned, and not particularly well-muscled. In some families, this would not have mattered. When you were the only son of a man who had once been a professional football player, it mattered a lot. Herb Bronson, Ray's father, had been known in his youth as the Booter. Friends from early days still called him that, and sometimes he referred to himself that way in a half-joking manner. "Dinner ready yet?" he would call out as he came in the door in the evening. The Booter's hungry enough to eat a bowl, and Miss Bronson, busy in the kitchen, would laugh and call back, "How lucky for me, braised bull is just what I'd planned to serve." The Booter had not had a particularly long or glorious career. He had received a knee injury in his second year as defensive halfback and had reluctantly retired from professional athletics. He was, however, a highly successful businessman. Bronson's sporting goods store had been the first of what eventually became a small chain of stores in 2 southwestern states. Ray's build had been a disappointment to the Booter, and he had always known it. At the same time, he had known that his father loved him. Teasing comments were tempered with affection. "Hey, Pee-wee," Herb Bronson would say jovially. When are you going to put on some weight? And at Christmas time, half the stock in the Bronson stores would appear beneath the tree. Footballs, shoulder pads, bats and rackets, boxing gloves and camping gear. Ray had not done badly in the minor sports. He was a member of the high school golf team and could play a decent game of tennis. It was football that was beyond him. He had managed to make the B squad in junior high because a number of his contemporaries had not yet acquired their full growth. But suddenly, upon entering high school, he had found himself surrounded by towering individuals with weights up to and above 200 pounds. The boys were friendly, and most of them knew the Booter by reputation. If he could not compete with them physically, Ray was superior to many of them academically. They respected him for this, as he was a natural-born teacher. He often made himself useful in a tutoring capacity. No major athlete himself, he did have athletes for companions. The first time he brought Barry Cox home with him for dinner, his father and Barry had sat over tall glasses of milk for 2 hours after the meal was over, replaying plays from Herb's career and more recent ones from Barry's experiences. "That's a sharp kid," Mr. Bronson had remarked late that evening after Barry had left for home. "He's going to make it big, I'll bet. He's a good friend of yours, Pee-wee." "You and he buddy around together a lot?" "Yes," he had said. "Good stuff," his father had commented approvingly. "I like to see you with friends like that." And later that year, when he started dating Julie James, there had been a similar reaction. "Got a cheerleader for a girlfriend, huh? Chip off the old block, aren't you?" Cuties of the school they were in the day. It took a real guy to hook a cheerleader. Julie had been more than that, much more, but this he had not told his father. He had just crooked an eyebrow and made a little "here's to us" motion with his hand, and his father had clapped him on the shoulder in a man-to-man way. It was disappointing, sure, to have a son who couldn't make it in your footsteps, but Ray was there in spirit, doing his best, and the Booter knew it and respected him for it. That was the Raymond Bronson of a year ago. Sometimes when Ray thought back upon himself, it was like looking at another person. It wasn't anybody. "Oh no, I wasn't anybody," he thought incredulously. "Not anyone real. I was kind of a shadow. Partly Dad, partly Barry, not making it either way and not knowing how else I could make it. I don't know what Julie saw in me, but she had to have seen something. 'I love you,' she had said once. Only once. They didn't get romantic very often. They usually just goofed around and had a good time like the rest of the kids. But there had been one time when she had turned to him suddenly and had seen something in his face that had reflected back into hers. They hadn't been making out or anything. It was right in the middle of a Sunday afternoon, and they had been sitting on the floor in the living room of the Jameses' home playing some crazy card game, and out of the blue, Julie had looked across at him and said, "I love you." Well, that was the past. She didn't love him now. That love had been snuffed out forever in one instant on one summer's night, as quickly and irrevocably as one little boy's life. Barry had been driving too fast. Barry always drove too fast when it came to that. But he drove well, and nobody got upset about it. Helen had been sitting close to him in the front seat when he thought back. Ray could remember that because he could remember her hair hanging over the back seat, swinging back and forth as the car took the curves. Aside from that, he didn't remember anything much because he had been kissing Julie most of the time during that ride. It was Ray's car. But as usual, he and Barry had flipped for the back seat, and this time he had won. Julie had been sprawled in his arms, and she had been wearing a pink blouse with ruffles. Everywhere his hands went, there were ruffles, and they had been laughing about it. And while they laughed, they were kissing, and then Helen had screamed. The scream had brought them both upright in an instant. There had not been time to see much before it happened. The bicycle had been there in front of them, caught in the glare of the headlights. They had seen the child from the back. He had been wearing a striped t-shirt. Then there was a thud and the crunch, and they were past. "My God," Julie had whispered from beside him. "We hit him." Ray had tried to answer, but somehow he could not get his voice working. The car had not stopped. It was moving on. It was going faster. It took the next curve with such speed that they were all thrown sideways, and Julie had fallen on top of him and had lain there, clutching him, whispering over and over, "Ray, we hit him." "Go back," Ray had managed to croak. "We've got to go back. Go back," Barry yelled over his shoulder. What good would that do? In the seat beside him, Helen was sobbing wildly. Julie leaned forward, pulling away from Ray. "That little boy, we've got to go back and help him." "Help him? We're not doctors. We couldn't do anything." Barry had slowed down a little now and was driving more evenly. "We'll get to a phone and call for an ambulance. That's the best kind of help we can give him." They rounded the next curve, and up ahead there appeared the lights of an all-night diner. The car retained its speed. "There," Julie cried. "Aren't you going to stop?" "Barry, you're passing it." "We can't call from there," Barry said tersely. "There'll be a counterphone in a room full of people to listen to every word. There's a roadside booth up ahead about a mile. We'll call from that." A few moments later, the booth appeared just as he had predicted, and his foot hit the brake, bringing the car to a careful stop. Ray was the first out of the car and into the phone booth. For one frantic moment, he thought he didn't have a dime, and then he found one and thrust it into the slot and dialed 911 emergency number. "There's been an accident," he said, "on Mountain Road, south of Silver Springs. It's just above junction with 301. We hit a kid on a bicycle. Who's making this call?" The voice of the emergency operator asked. "My name is," Ray began. Barry's hand came down hard on the receiver, breaking the connection. Ray turned to him in amazement. "What did you do that for?" "You told her enough. You said what happened and where. There's an ambulance up there in a couple minutes. There's no sense giving our names. They'll get them when we go back," Ray said. He paused, full realization beginning to sweep over him. "We are going back, aren't we?" "For what?" "Why, because we have to." "We don't have to do anything," Barry said. They had left the booth now and were standing beside the car. In the front seat, Helen had stopped her sobbing. Behind her, Julie too was sitting in silence. There was not enough light to see either of their faces. All right, I'm going to end it here because I got like 2 minutes before this cuts me off, and I will read this more another day. I hope you guys are liking it. I'll be reading a lot of books, to be honest. A lot of books and some poems throughout the future podcasts, definitely. So look forward to doing that. And I hope that whoever is listening finds this podcast to be helpful, interesting, and worth telling others about. All right. Have a great night, and God bless, guys.